I'm Stephen Thrasher, staff writer for The Village Voice, and I'm talking to Chris Geidner of Metro Weekly and the Polyglot blog, and also winner of a 2012 GLAAD Media Award for his series on the 15th anniversary of the passage of DOMA. Chris, thanks so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Stephen.
So, just getting right down to it, is Obama doing enough for the gays? I think that's the bottom line of what we're talking about.
Well, I mean, I think that the question about how much Obama has or hasn't done for the LGBT community is something that individuals are going to have to decide. But I think that each individual occurrence of an issue that comes up raises its own questions about why or why not the White House and or the president take the action or make the statement that advocates want him to make.
So let's talk about what you've been reporting on, the lack of an executive order regarding LGBT employment discrimination. And why don't you start talking about how you broke the story of how candidate Senator Obama seemed to have, once upon a time, supported a potential executive order?
Well, yeah, back in March, we reported that in 2008, Obama had filled out, then Senator Obama, when a candidate for president, had filled out a survey for the Houston GLBT Political Caucus, in which he was asked 4 questions regarding employment non-discrimination. He was asked whether or not he currently had employment non-discrimination and whether he would continue that in office, whether he would support a similar policy of non-discrimination for all federal employees, whether he would support such a non-discrimination policy for all federal contractors, and then whether he would support ENDA. And his response at that time in 2008 was that he had a non-discrimination policy based on sexual orientation and gender identity for his campaign and would have it in office, that he would support such a non-discrimination policy for all federal employees, that he would support such a non-discrimination policy for all federal contractors, and that he would put his administration's weight behind the passage of ENDA. And so his answer to all 4 questions was essentially yes, and they were separate questions, and he answered the federal contractor question yes without a condition or without a sense that saying yes to this actually just meant that he supported ENDA or anything like that.
So fast forward, that for some reason gets lost in a vault for years until you turn it up. We've now passed, the country's passed the Matthew Shepard hate crimes legislation, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and discrimination in employment comes up again. Why is the White House, well, first of all, just say, how is the White House hedging this last week and kind of what happened through then until today, in terms of whether or not they would support something like this? Is it on the table, or are they strictly only holding to a potential legislative path?
Well, the White House had refused to comment for a significant period of time on whether or not they had any view on the executive order. Jay Carney's White House press secretary's regular response was that the White House supported non-discrimination policies generally, and that the president had endorsed ENDA, but that they don't comment on executive orders that may or may not be under consideration. Last Wednesday, the White House, however, senior advisor Valerie Jarrett called together all of the major LGBT advocates who had been working on this issue and basically sat them down and told them, well, we're not going to go forward with the non-discrimination executive order at this time, and we'll continue to work toward putting a campaign together, or an effort together to advance ENDA. And that was then I had found out about the meeting that was going on and actually watched some of the people go into the meeting, and then HRC actually released the first statement after the meeting saying that they were disappointed that the White House wasn't going to be going forward with the executive order at this time. And the 6 days since then have been a series of sort of half answers as to why the action hasn't been taken and what the path forward is.
So, HRC took a little bit of heat for endorsing the president quite far out by Go Proud and by Log Cabin. Are they looking and feeling a little silly, or like they don't have much leverage now because they, obviously they're going to be with the president? What are you hearing about their approach right now in terms of what levers they can pull to put pressure on him?
No, I don't think that in conversations that I've had with Joe Solmonese, he thinks that it's absurd to pretend that has an impact one way or the other. That their ability to endorse, that the ability of what they gained by endorsing early enabled them to go out aggressively and support the president electorally on several issues that they feel has really helped them with the administration. And at the same time, this is the first thing that's really happened this year that has been a cause for disappointment for LGBT advocates. And HRC has been out in front in a way that has even impressed Tico Almeida, who runs Freedom to Work and has been one of the more aggressive voices in pushing the president to adopt this executive order.
Well, what does HRC have to say about how they think this would play electorally? Do they think it would hurt the president? I mean, I've heard people.
There's nobody who thinks that this would hurt the president electorally.
Because I've even heard, here in New York, marriage people who will say, some marriage people do want the president completely out, of course, for marriage, and then there's some who just say he can't change it. We don't want him to make this a distraction because he can't really do anything about it right now.
Right.
Well, but this he could do something about right now.
And that's the problem, and where things get a little confusing with the White House's. The White House's answer was that the time is right for a comprehensive legislative solution to the problem of workplace discrimination. Exactly. You have to sort of laugh. It's like the White House's entire campaign over the past 6 months has been, we can't wait, because of the fact that they can't get anything through the House. And so to take basically the exact opposite approach with employment discrimination for LGBT people is nonsensical. They are saying when it comes to economic issues, just today with regards to oil prices, that they're taking executive action because they can't wait for Congress to act. And when it comes to employment discrimination, they're saying that the time is right for a piece of legislation that does not have the support of the House Republican leadership.
So, just being in Washington and being involved with people down there, you don't think there's any chance that this would hurt the president electorally? What do you think?
The argument against him taking action on this is that this would enable an argument that the president is anti-business, that the president is saddling businesses with more regulation, and particularly to do so in an election year against who is putting himself forward as a pro-business candidate in Mitt Romney, could have potential downside for the president electorally, but that sort of is disregarding the mathematical reality of the fact that, one, most people think that employment discrimination is already illegal based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And secondly, even when asked specifically about passing such things, there is overwhelming support, even from Republicans, for it. So yes, there's a theoretical argument out there, but that argument has not been advanced on its face by anybody.
Well, do you think perhaps they're worried, because you have a good piece up today after the briefing where you outlined 4 reasons why this is a different case than repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jay Carney has said repeatedly that that the path taken in repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a great model for what they're doing here. But the problem with that is, of course, that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, we had a House and Senate that was of the same party as the president. And in addition to that, as I point out in the piece, we also had a Pentagon that was not as supportive of the change, that they had to be won over to this change. And that was the point of the time between when President Obama called for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the State of the Union and when the repeal passed, because that's when the Pentagon took on the Comprehensive Review Working Group.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that because you said that there is support in the Labor Department for
right.
but could there potentially, I mean, perhaps the administration is afraid that the contractors themselves will say, I don't want this foisted on me, and Mitt Romney will say, well, the government's going to foist these things on private contractors and enslave them to devilish ideals of the administration. Is that, do you think, perhaps what they're...
Well, I mean, the reality is that most of the largest contractors already have these non-discrimination.
Interesting.
So there's not... There is not the argument that this is a regulation that is outside of the mainstream of American business. This is a practice that has already been implemented voluntarily by businesses as a part of the work that the Human Rights Campaign and others have done. I mean, the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index has been one of the things that even people who often criticize HRC have pointed to as an example of something that HRC has done well. And we've seen a great increase in the number of businesses who have these non-discrimination policies, and among them are a substantial number of the largest federal contractors already.
Interesting. So do you think this is going to go away, or the administration tries to kind of have it both ways with marriage, a little bit wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But if they don't move forward on this, then they are clearly taking a side. Is this something that you think the gay organizations are going to ride the administration on throughout the campaign season?
Well, I think that the administration is surprised by the fact that they are getting the pushback that they're getting from organizations like HRC. HRC just today started a Facebook and online campaign urging people to write to the president and the Senate to take action now. And so the fact that HRC's response, despite the fact, I mean, when you talk about this early endorsement, I mean, the fact that despite HRC's early endorsement, that they are still putting pressure on the White House to revisit this decision and take action is a step that I don't think the White House was expecting. I think that they thought that this would be a 2 or 3 day story and people would move on to something else. And it doesn't look like that's what they're going to get.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris Geidner of Metro Weekly, and
Thank
GLAAD
you.
Media Award winner for 2011 for Magazine article. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Stephen.